Instagram. Brother and sister are back.
Back again. You know, I think there was a guy on my Facebook who thinks that we're actually brother and sister.
Oh, wow. Maybe we were in like another life.
Yeah, I think so too.
It almost feels that way.
We're not genetically brother and sister, but we are in every other. It's really.
Yeah, it's like we like to come on here and just talk about all sorts of things happening in the world, in life, whether it's from AI to relations, to gender relations, to politics, to, gosh, what else have we covered? We've had various guests.
I know, this is episode 12.
And we are now to episode 12.
It's so crazy.
Of Launch Radio today.
I love what we do. I think it's, and I know we have a lot of people that, you know, like I get comments afterward and people are like, wow, that was actually really fascinating. I would have never thought about something like that, you know?
Yeah. And if we're, influencing people in some way, making them think differently about themselves or the world, we feel like we've kind of done our job, like to help people think outside their own boxes and to kind of expand our thinking in general about issues in life. If people are saying that and we've done that, I think that's a great thing.
I think so too. I agree.
And so
episode 12. What's on the docket today, Geoff?
So episode 12, Launch Radio today, we wanted to talk a little bit, and we've touched on this topic before a little bit, but we want to talk about connecting gender relations, just connecting male and female, and kind of what the current perspective of things are in society, what both males and females are thinking about each other, what we're doing to help people get along and to get people to get along within that hemisphere, and what better way to do it than you and I discussing it.
Yes.
And I think to start the discussion today, you wanted to address a question that you had about things.
Yeah, so I just recently launched my YouTube channel, and the first video that I posted was like 2 weeks ago was why men and why I'm a men's advocate. And I also mentioned in it that, if anyone was interested in a particular topic for me to talk about, to message me or DM me through Instagram or whatever. And I got a few, and I actually got one that was really, really intriguing. And it says, I live in a town that's very pro-feminism, which I'm in support of wholeheartedly. Though a lot of millennials in my generation and area think of feminism in terms of man-hating and generalizing all men to be horrible monsters, therefore perpetuating the inequality that we're all trying to eradicate. This is something that I found myself having to bite my lip for the sake of keeping myself from being alienated and looking like a monster myself. Any advice on sticking up for men without invalidating women, or at least seeming like I am? So in a male bashing type of conversation or world, as a man, how do you support women but also stick up for men when they're being called these horrible monsters?
I think that's a great question.
It's an amazing question, because when I got it, I was like, holy shit, that's a great question. It's really, really good. It's tough. It's one you have to think about, because I've been in those situations where I'm, and so have you.
Mm-hmm.
There was you had the Facebook post that just happened the other day that was along the same lines of like a sensitivity around men talking about women and then being called out for some sexism of some sort.
Yeah, and so how did you, when they asked that, what was your
I said,
response?
This is an amazing question, and I will create a video about it. So I was like, I need time to figure out how to exactly answer that, because that's a challenge, especially from a woman's perspective. The way, when I do create the video and launch it on YouTube, the way I always approach something that's very uncomfortable or an odd topic, and you're not agreeing with the other person, and you're having, or they may be bashing whatever you are, I let them have the podium, let them, get it out. But then I also ask questions for clarification as to why they think those things, or why they feel it needs to be that way, and create much more of a dialogue versus an argument. Because I think it's very easy if the person's really like bashing on something that you firmly believe in, it's easy for you to get sucked into that zone of argument, Whereas I like to open it up and be like, okay, well, why do you feel that way? And create much more of a conversational to change our rhetoric a little bit. This whole, like, it's me versus you. We kind of live in that society, especially in the US, where it's like, I'm poor, you're rich, there's just such massive polar opposites within our country that are not so united, that it's easy for us to be like, well, I'm on this side, what side are you on?
Right.
And for me, I'd much rather create the connection and the understanding, and together create a different way of going about things. And if that, and at the same time, that person needs to be open to it. Like, if they just want to have their voice heard, and they just want to, like, hash out all whatever is going on, then that's on them. But,
well, yeah, and I agree with you, and I think that asking, first of all, there's nothing ever wrong with having to step back and take a moment and think about your response to people, because I feel like people react often too much from emotion, and that's usually the knee-jerk reaction. And when people can step back and kind of process things for a moment, or even take a day when like something politically or in general issues like amps you up, it's always best to kind of step back for a bit first before knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. Which is hard, because we live in that instant gratification where someone just wrote this shit comment and you're like, rah, I'm gonna write back. And so you never take that few minutes to think about what you're about to write, and the impact that what you're about to say may have on you or that other person. So I think that's really fair.
That's right.
In that moment,
And in regards to, because I experienced, like you're saying, I experienced something like this past week, where, there was a post that I made on Facebook with an article, and it had two women who are female pilots flying a plane, and they were doing Instagram photos, from the cockpit, and
they were the pilots.
They were the pilots. They were now pilots. It wasn't just two random people. It was two pilots, females flying the plane. They were doing Instagram photos, and the subject of the article was, what did it say specifically? It said that females have, and the females, these two females are now pilots flying the plane. And I posted the article, and having no, whether it was males flying the plane or females flying the plane, it didn't matter. I just made a joke about people are social mediaing so much today. Everybody's doing social media, posting this. I said, let's make sure we're flying the plane though, folks. Having no, sexual...
Yeah, male or female, it doesn't matter.
Was meant.
Yeah.
I was just making a joke about how everybody's on social media. And, let's fly the plane, let's not be Instagramming while we're flying. And a couple people came on, and were, not happy about it, because they thought that there was, sexist tones underneath that, because
sexist tones under what you wrote.
Under what I said, yeah. That let's let's make sure we're flying the plane. And there was no, when I posted, that wasn't even, there was no thought of that even. It was simply saying, it was a statement about social media and how everybody's posting. But they took it and said that it was that I was, somehow, there were sexist tones to it because I was talking about how, saying that let's make sure we fly the plane was somehow implying that, like, women had done it or couldn't do it. And there was none of that intended. at all by me. No, there was no sexism to it whatsoever. And in those situations, there's two kind of critical approaches here, and which I think we need to talk about today, also in regards to yours, to try to help everybody.
Because this happens a lot. I have a feeling a lot of men have to get into this really tough situation where they're like, they can't really say anything about women without the sensitivity blowing into some trigger of some sort. And that's fair. You want to be sensitive to the other gender, whoever it is. And that has to do with race. I mean, this has
It's
much
universal.
bigger implications than just a male-female type of conversation. But, you know, for today's purposes, it's much more about the, you know, male-female. But it's how do you deal with the sensitivity of that other person, even though you may support that person wholeheartedly? How do you still talk about anything without triggering that other person into this like warped, you know, mentality?
That's right. And by the way, it was ironic too, because 3 days prior I had actually posted a YouTube video and on Facebook of me being very pro-female about females and sports and supporting females in sports. And it was a very, very pro-female video that I had done 3 days prior. So it was ironic that then these people were coming in and, you know, mad that I seemed to be implying sexist, you know, about when that wasn't even intended, after I had done a pro-female video just 3 days prior. Like, the irony of that was funny. But I think in regards to what you just said, first off, yes, there has to be a sensitivity to when people get mad. I recognize when people are upset about something. You have to be able to step back and be sensitive to that. Even though things weren't intended, sometimes things can offend other people,
Correct.
and you not realize it. And
Right.
this is something everybody goes through in our society.
I deal with that on a daily basis.
Daily. So I think the first thing you have to do is understand that. And a lot of people struggle with that, to understand that you have to be sensitive to how other people are feeling and how things come across. And I think that in whether it's race relations or gender wars, that a lot of people fail to recognize that.
Right.
And so one element of how I handled it is I did apologize,
Right.
even though nothing was intended. And there's certain people that don't apologize, which I don't think is
Yep.
right. Our president being one of them. Trump literally doesn't believe in
Right.
apologizing.
Right.
He'll
Correct.
say that, which I don't agree
Whether
with.
you believe it is apologize or not, that's like fact that he just doesn't.
He doesn't apologize.
Right.
And so I think what apologizing does is it doesn't show it doesn't show weakness. It shows that you're sensitive to other people's feelings, and
Correct.
not, even if you didn't intend to hurt them or upset them, you're still sensitive to it. And so that's a big deal. Like, just being able to do that. Like, I want to get that out there. And that's the former president's more way of approaching
Correct.
things.
It's having empathy and saying, oh, yeah,
Obama.
I could see where that might have come across that way, and I apologize.
Correct.
You know, taking the accountability of like, that was not my intention.
Yes.
I take full responsibility for that, and you know, thank you for letting me know. Then there's the other
The other
part of
side.
it, where it's like, if you don't accept that as that person, where you're like, well, fuck you, no, I'm angry still, then what? Then it's like, I'm trying to be open and tell you that that was not what I was implying, and now you're continuing into this hate speech rhetoric of like, I'm angry and I'm pissed and I'm on a soapbox, and just let me be.
So I think that person on the other side also needs to recognize.
Correct. So there
that.
needs to be sensitivities on both sides, where it's like, hey, I feel for you. I'm sorry if I was in your position. I apologize. I can understand how you're hurt. Then the other person needs to feel that reciprocate that sensitivity of like, that's okay, I accept your apology, or no, I don't accept your apology, whatever it is. But to continue into the pattern of this like turn into this massive hate angry argument
Mm-hmm.
on social media, I don't know what that does for that person. Like what,
For either side.
there's either clearly some anger residing in that person, but then what do you do, Geoff, at this point, at this standpoint where this person's going off the rails and you've apologized, you've accepted that that could have potentially been a hurtful thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that person's clearly not accepting it, and then instead using this as their soapbox to then get out their own frustrations. So what do you do at that point? Other than text Kira and be like, bring in the guns, Kira, let's go.
Well, and actually, my first approach was more confronting. Like, I confronted them. I did it the reverse way. Like, I explained to them that that's not what was intended and that she's seeing things that aren't there. Like, literally.
Right.
That was not, because that person was seeing things that were not, were not there and were not intended. But because there's a sensitivity, which you have to be recognized, I also apologize because I'm sensitive that some people may have created something or see something that's there
Right.
that I don't.
Right.
So first I confronted them, I did, just say, and then I apologized. But how do you get, and this is so universal, how do we get people to, how do you handle that person in that situation? Like, how do you deal with it after you've apologized, after, if they don't want to continue to talk about it, how do you handle it? I mean, my belief is that you've said what you can say.
Right.
Like, you've literally done what you needed to do
Right.
in that situation. And because we can't control how other people think and feel and react, we can only be empathetic to it. So you have to kind of let them go, like let them do their thing,
So you just ignore them then at that point, where if they continue the rant, then who gets the last word? And it's like, here, have the last word, I don't care. If that makes you feel good for your own ego, then by all means rant away and just ignore them at that point.
You can't, I mean, unfortunately, you can't, people don't change their opinion often
Right.
through arguing and through bickering, through confronting
We
each
think
other.
they do.
We
That's
think
why
they do.
that's why we argue and bicker, because we're like, no, I'm right, and I'm just gonna yell until you get on my side. It's like, no, actually that never works.
Yeah.
Like ever. What's the saying? You can get more bees to honey than vinegar or something. What's word?
Oh yeah. You can get
Flies.
Flies.
You
to
can
honey.
attract flies to honey more than vinegar. I don't know.
Yeah.
You guys know what I mean.
What's the analogy? Does
It's
anybody?
Sunday morning. I don't know. I can't remember.
By the way, we're gonna get to a point where we have this like here and we can talk to people.
I know,
We're
because
gonna-
then that way the screen would be like, it would just be Kira, and then I'd be like, hey. You know what I mean? It'd be
Yeah,
like
yeah.
way too close. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Anyway, so I think that it's a very tough issue, and I think you have to try to get people to. We have to try to get everybody to the next level of trying to understand each other.
Well, first, it's take a step back. If
First, it's take a
if
step
you're
back.
being on both sides, let's
Mhm.
say if someone's confronting you, and I've had this happen. Surprisingly, I haven't had too many women who are like, "Oh my God, what the f are you doing? Why are you supporting men?" But I have had a few women who have not so much confronted me, but were just a little aggressive in their tone of like, "What are you doing?" And it would be very easy for me to be like, lash out back at them, but that's not how you evolve as a species. You don't just join them down in the trenches as they're getting angry. You rise above that and be the bigger person. And as obnoxious as that is, someone has to be, or it just stays within this bickering nonsense that gets nothing done. So
First, you have to step back.
you have to
That's
take a
your
step back
Okay.
and take that time to collect your thoughts, because I think, to your point, there's that jerk reaction where you're like, that knee-jerk reaction where you're like, rah, whatever that is, and generally your first comment is not going to be so kind. So like, take a step back first, understand that the person you're talking to has emotions and opinions, and they're valid even if you may not agree with them. So think about what you're going to say before you say it, because words do have a massive impact on people. Secondly would be to be accountable for whatever you've written, whatever that is. Whether it could be the most innocent thing, like your post, where it was like I wasn't even thinking about women. You know what I mean? I wasn't even thinking about any sexism in this. It's shocking that anyone could turn it into it.
Right.
However, someone obviously was triggered by it, so you say, my apologies, that was not what I implied at all. That's not what my intentions were at all. My apologies if it seemed that way. And then from then on, it's not up to you. It's up to that person and the way they respond. Because if you think about it, we're all adults. We make a choice every single minute of every day of how we respond to certain events. Whatever happens in our life. We can respond with freak out and meltdown, or we can respond in a kindness, sympathetic, respectful way. We make choices every single day, and we blame it on other people when we react. And it's like, no, your reactions, you own your reactions. So if you're going to react in a negative way, that's on you.
It doesn't say something about who you are, it says something about who they are.
Exactly. So if they react in and they're not recognizing that you're making the attempt to apologize and create a safer space and maybe heighten the species a bit instead of staying down in this like bickering zone.
Right.
Then that's a reflection on where they are as a person and their evolution. Not everyone is at the same speed as becoming a better human being. Some people just want to stay in the trenches. And you know what? That's fine. Let them stay in the trenches. You're not gonna change anyone. You know, how many people out there have literally been able to change someone? You know, it just doesn't happen. So, but your karma is the way you react, not how the other person reacts. It's all about how you present yourself to the world.
And have you heard of, this is very relevant to this, have you heard of the 48-hour rule?
I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Heard of it? Okay.
Which, I mean, my God, who actually does that?
And
48 hours is like, it's 2 days.
I heard...
it's crazy.
Where I got it was, I heard Scott Adams talking about it, and what he said was that when somebody says something that could be misconstrued, or that somebody else interpreted in a bad way, or that was, you know, like, questionable what they meant, if the person comes out and apologizes genuinely within 48 hours, they should be forgiven for what they said. Like, they should be forgiven. They have 48 hours to apologize, whether it's about, because I don't, you know, and so he says, I don't want to live in a society where we think we know more about what they're thinking than they do.
Well, no, everyone's a mind reader, Geoff.
Everyone's a mind reader.
Everyone's a mind reader now.
I mean...
They're telling you what you were thinking in your own head, and you're like, but that's not what I was thinking, so who's the crazy one? Like, you know, like...
So, we need to get to this place where if someone apologizes and they genuinely apologize, and it looks genuine and we can tell.
Correct.
We need to trust that person.
Yeah, and let the shit go.
As a society.
How much energy do you waste? You know, as humans, we only have so much mental energy and emotional energy that we expend out to the world, right? And we all have different fills of it. Where, you know, a lot of times, and you'll know when you get home, you're like exhausted, you're like, I can't talk to anyone more. I'm so tired. And that's when you know you've hit your fill. So how much energy are you expending out to all these kind of not real important conversations where you're putting all this energy into getting so upset and having such a massive reaction? It's like you're taking that energy and putting it to something so minute and so not important that then you don't have the energy to spend on something really important in your life that day, like your family or whatever. And so just know that you as a person have your limits. You can't just get angry at everyone. and then not expect that to affect you personally in return. So pick your battles. Let shit go.
Karma comes back to
let shit go. People hold on to things for years and they cannot let it go.
Grudges.
I mean, look at, it's, and then they wonder why there's so much stress and they have stomach problems and they're, having heart attacks early. It's like, you've got to learn to be able to accept apologies when people give it, and then let it go. Move on with life. I mean, it's easier said than done, but oh my God, it would be really interesting to me personally, I think, to see what world would be like if people were held accountable for their actions. Like if you think about trolls, online, they're not held accountable. They're allowed to say whatever the F they want. And if you think about anyone's allowed to say whatever they want, it could be the most hurtful, disrespectful, hateful speech. And no one says, hey, that is wildly inappropriate and you will be punished because that you're spreading negativity in our society. That doesn't exist. We're allowed to spread as much negativity as we want.
Yeah. And I feel like, there's almost, some things that are said online can be subjective and, people turn to ways, but as far as just the troll count in general, of online, my YouTube videos, the amount of critics that you have to deal with, and you really have to be a person who can deal with it, who can take that. I actually like critics. It actually
it's fun.
Gives me energy to I like confronting them when they confront me. But I have to bring out the sensitive side and apologize to people in some ways because I do understand that. But the critics in my YouTube videos are there's so much of that out there, especially on the internet, and
they're not held. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to. Words have so much impact, and we don't even realize it, and it breeds this negative environment in society. Yet no one's held accountable for it. There's not a policing type of system in our society where it's hey, you are being hateful or you're being disrespectful. We need to enact a police. We have police to find the murderers and rapists and all of that, but we don't have it for our own respect and words that we use. And how do you, what do you do with that? It's not going to be communism or something, but at the same time, why can't we police what people say, and what the negativity that they're spreading around in society?
I feel first, there has to be people have to understand there's a difference too between, I like people to disagree. If people disagree, that's one thing because you can stick up for your point of view. But the moment that people become personal, that when they personally start insulting you or coming after, who you are, that's more because you want to have disagreement. You want to have different opinions. It's good for people to have their own opinion. It's good to debate those. But the moment people come from anger and insulting you personally, the argument is over. That's it.
Correct.
If you're going to insult me personally, it's done.
Right.
You can disagree with me and have criticism. Criticism is good for our society to disagree on points. But anything personal the argument is immediately done. I don't care if it's on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. If somebody personally starts insulting you, they should be completely blocked because there's no need to take any disagreement to a personally insulting someone.
And I think the minute they do that, I think it's really that knee-jerk reaction where you're well, fuck you, and then you start, and it's no, don't get to their level. They don't deserve it. Just block them.
Just be done with it.
Just be done with it. But don't then take that and then hold it.
Right.
And then go through life, go through your day angry because of whatever reaction you have with Joe Schmo on the internet. Because what you're doing is taking what happened to you and then placing your shit on someone else.
So you
just cut someone off on the freeway because you're angry or whatever. Everyone's connected by the way we all react to what's going on in our lives. So react in a good way, that you're not going to go piss someone else off that is like, what the hell is wrong with that person? You know, it's like, oh, because I got angry on the internet today. Like, choose your battles. You know, not everything deserves the energy that you're putting into it.
You're projecting your own guilt. You're
Yep.
projecting your own, it's just projection. So it's good to disagree, it's good to have criticism, but it's not good to attack anyone personally.
Now, do you feel as a man, you know, getting back to the kind of the topic of it, I feel that when a man is in a situation where he's around women who are bashing men, then it's a very like hateful type of thing where all men are terrible, all men are monsters. You know, I think I think it's very valid, and it never happens. I don't know one person if it has. I would love to see the example of it. But I would love to see a man rise up and say, hey, that's actually really hurtful to me.
Yeah.
I'm on your side. I'm pro-female, and you're bashing me because I'm a male, and I'm like right in front of you. Like, I'm actually hurt by that. So I think you should be sensitive to the other person. You should be sensitive to women, but there also needs to be the reciprocal, where you also need to receive the sensitivity from that other person. Like, hey, I'm standing right here, I'm a male. You know what I mean? I'm on your side. I'm feeling attacked. I've never really seen a male rise up and make that personal for him and say, hey, that's really mean, you know, or whatever it is. Like, be honest with your feelings and say, hey, that actually really hurt that you're saying things like that in front of me. You know, like, I would love to see a man stand up and say that. I think that'd be bonkers. That'd be amazing.
Well, I think that, and I think that guys have been told for so long that, you know, don't ignore your feelings and keep all that down, and don't, even though they're all guys have feelings, like, it's all there. They've just been told by society that they have to keep that hidden away, and that they're not supposed to do that. And so
they don't feel pain. So to recognize it would be
going against
go against the grain.
A frame of thinking that society has taught them of how they have to be.
Right.
And I think that, and that's what I'm trying to do, is get more guys to not be so afraid of that, because you're not less of a man because you state how you feel or what you believe. Like,
I mean, I think that's the entire topic. You know, I think that's like, boom, mic drop. You're not less of a man if you say, this is how I feel.
Yeah, and more of that needs to happen, because guys are not doing that enough when they need to.
I agree. So then I get the comments where it's like, I don't know how to talk to women if they're bashing men in front of me. It's like, you tell them how you feel. You're telling me right now how you feel. Tell that to them. That you're like, hey, I'm on your side. I'm a you know, pro-female. You bashing men is really hurtful to me. It would be if I were to bash women.
So how do we get females on that side to understand that as well? To understand that what they might be saying to a guy when they're saying this stuff is also hurtful to the guy. That's because
it's a lot of awareness, because when I was married, I wasn't a mean person. I just never, and it's funny, I've talked to other women about it, and not even when I was married, it was like even past relationships. I didn't really recognize that men had emotions, because they're just kind of, they don't really show them. So it's easy for women to take advantage of it, because, and not recognizing that we just forget that they have emotions, and we forget that some of the things are actually quite painful and hurtful, but we wouldn't know unless we're called out on it.
Yeah.
You know, I can think back to some of the things that I probably have said to my ex-husband that was like not the kindest, but I didn't know because he didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So then we just continue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, honestly, men have to start standing up and saying, "Hey, that's hurtful," or "This is how it feels," or women are just going to continue attacking it. You know, and there won't be this type of like, "Hey, I'm a human being. You're talking to me in a really horrible way." Now, or you could be a very much more evolved person and not get into that rhetoric at all as a woman. But I think most women just recognize that, or think and believe that men don't really have the same depth of emotions as they do. So it's harder to hurt them. That's what most women think, and I can probably speak very, very with a high rate of, you know.
Yeah, and and I can say from the guy's perspective too, though, that our natural reaction too is to confront
Correct.
and to fight with them, because we're, you know,
That's what
we
you're
want to
supposed
stand
to do.
up for guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like the point is, both sides are wrong and both sides are right. There's a paradox happening here.
Yeah.
And for guys, instead of fighting and just escalating the argument and going, you know, extremely pro-male, like the way to do it is let that person know how much it affected you.
Correct.
And by letting that person know it affected you, you're being much more of a masculine guy.
Correct.
That is where masculinity and strength
Yes.
in guys
Being very having that self-worth and that strength as a person to recognize and to be able to voice your emotions, that's strength. That's not a weakness at all. You know, I'd much rather that in a partner of a man who's like, "Hey, that hurt me and this is why," or whatever, I feel this. I find that very attractive as a woman because I know he is a well-rounded individual. A man that cannot speak up and say what his emotions are is one that I don't want to be in a partnership with or around because I know that it's all inside and it's just waiting to explode in some way. And the only other people on planet Earth that do that hold it in and explode, are children. And that's why men are sometimes paralleled with like a child because they just blow up or like have a meltdown or have like the 2-year-old tantrum, you know? And it's because
do with it, yeah.
Correct. And that's why the men who are able to voice how they feel and like whatever emotion that is, whether that's someone who, you know, sent them some shit thing on Facebook or whatever, to say, "Hey, this is how I feel," that to me is a very, very well-rounded, very evolved human being.
And people talk about masculinity. That's more masculine.
That is more masculine to me than anything.
You know, than being confrontational and being like, "Fuck that bitch." You know, like guys want to get confrontational.
Yeah.
That's not showing strength.
No, and to be honest, for women, we just roll our eyes and find that extremely embarrassing to be with. To be honest, like I would much rather have a guy who's much more put together and can let his emotions out and like say how he's feeling versus like, you know, when he just shove them down and fight it out because I think that's like that's what children do. That's what babies do, you know.
And so, on the other side of the coin,
so how do you get women to?
How do females? How does this apply to women in a way? Like, what's happening in the other hemisphere as well on the women's side of things? You know, if women say this stuff to guys, you know,
women can be really brutal to men, and I think, and that's a problem for me because it's acceptable for a woman to be rude to a man, but reverse that and it's you know, I mean, the world would collapse around him if he were to do something like that, you know. So it's like, it's very shocking to me when women feel that they deserve this, that they're allowed to talk to men the way that they do, and yet when a man does it, it's like World War III. And how could you? I'm a woman. Don't do that. It's like, no, you get respect by giving it. You don't just assume that you get it. Nobody deserves anything. you know? You earn it. And whether you're a male or female, black, white, doesn't matter. You know, we're all human beings.
You have to earn the respect.
You have to earn the respect.
Yeah.
So I think for women, personally, when women get on a soapbox and are like, you know, writing some comment to a guy about whatever, and you'll see it in the posts or whatever on Facebook, it'll be like a girl gang all of a sudden comes around. So you'll have like 5 or 6 women start to like join the girl gang, and then they gang up on the guy. And it's just like this power trip that women get where it's like, well, fuck you. You think you're so cool and so strong, like I've got my girl gang of random chicks, you know? How to diffuse a situation like that as a man, be the bigger person. As a female,
how does a female do it? Yeah, that's what I would...
I mean, I have been in those situations where I've seen it happen, and I'm not even part of the conversation, and I will call out women.
You will? Directly?
Directly and publicly. Because if you continue to think that men do not have emotions and you feel it's appropriate for you to say the words that you're saying and no one's holding you accountable, allow me. I will hold you accountable. Believe me. I will call you out on your shit, because anyone should be called out on their shit if they're going to talk in such a negative, hateful way toward anyone else. And I'm a stranger or not, everyone should be held accountable, and I believe that wholeheartedly, that people should be called out.
And I think that's great. Yeah, and I think that's really, really great. And do you think that there's, in a sports video I did, I talked about sports and how they're not professional sports. You know, there's now the transgender thing, which is, you know, transgenders playing, and also just mixing co-ed women and female in any sport. And in the video I talked about how there's another cognitive frame of society where, like, women, if they want to, can play in professional sports, maybe just in the minor leagues, because of physique. A lot of men are bigger, so I'm not saying that a woman's going to go be Rob Gronkowski for the Patriots tomorrow. But we're in this frame from the past where women didn't play co-ed with men, and we need to recognize that that's just a frame from the past. And people say, well, it's not fair, and that, you know, for the different sizes and physique. Nothing about sports is fair. Nothing
in life is fair. So if you never use that argument ever, I don't want one person that's watching this ever to say that's not fair. I have watched 5-year-olds say that. Adults, I'm sorry, but you've got to realize by now, in your age as an adult, that life is not fair. It's not supposed to be fair. That's not what this is about.
So nothing in sports is fair anyway.
Right.
And so to speak from the other side of the coin now, as well, is that, like, anything that there is an ego thing within sports and such, that, like, you know, women, you know, I don't want to get struck out by a chick, you know, or I don't want to get, and all of that, now speaking for women as well, is like that has to go away, because that's just frames from the past where you feel like things have to be a certain way. And so, but as far as the fairness argument, sports is not fair. People are all shapes and sizes. Having Shaq on your basketball team is not fair.
Right.
So,
even though he's slow.
Even though he's slow, we're having, you know, these massive players on your team. The physique argument doesn't apply, because yes, women might be smaller, and some women aren't. I mean, Serena Williams is ridiculous, but there's no reason that the door shouldn't be open right now. We're just not doing it because we're kind of waiting for everyone to come around to, like, the thinking.
That's typical society, where we have to, like, ease into it. Like, remember when women weren't, do you remember when we couldn't vote? Like, as if you were alive then. But
that's right.
I mean, it's the same thing where that was ridiculous that women would be allowed to vote. I mean, that's absurd. And now, like, to us, that's like, oh my God. Of course, like, in any society, there's got to be that growth and okay, getting used to something, like 10 years from now, legalizing marijuana will be just like, oh my God, it'd be like the alcohol prohibition in the 20s, you know what I mean? But it's that in the moment of like the fearing of the change, and is this degrading our society and all of that shit, and you've got the polar arguments on it.
And so people say things like, well, what about the locker room issue, and what about, and yes, there are going to be things that will have to be figured out and worked around, but with voting and with everything that we worked around these things to make them eventually happen. Like,
so do you feel women should be on the front line then?
As far, like you mean like in the military? I feel like the military, I feel like it should be open to all. I feel like there's certain, if anything's going to discriminate, it's the military.
100%.
Like, if any entity is going to discriminate,
I mean, you can't be openly transgender now, so
because the military is, protecting us, it's defense, and so they're the one entity where they kind of get a mulligan because of that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, and the government kind of said, they say it's an economic thing, and they say that a host of reasons why transgenders and such aren't allowed. And I don't think sports gets a pass at all. Like, it should be wide open to all transgender everything. I think the military is a little bit of a different question.
From a physical standpoint, or from a...
I think because there's reasons that I don't know enough about as far as protection and size and the people you need in certain positions to literally protect us, that if they can illustrate what those reasons are, then because it's the military and they're literally defending everybody, they have a right to do that.
Right.
But if they can't give me good reasons, and if it's just because the fairness issue is different. Sports is unfair. The military, you're just after, it's just defense.
Because there are lots of women who want to be on the front. I mean, they want to be Navy SEALs, and they want to, and I feel like women are now all of a sudden, or they're now allowed to be Navy SEAL. I can't remember what it is.
I'm not sure.
But it changes all the time.
But what do you think about that?
I think if women want to service the country and they want to fight in the front lines next to men, then by all means, who are we to say no? Years ago, thousands of years ago, women were, all kinds of historical stories of women fighting alongside men in battles and, everything else.
I think they should. I'm for that. I think that it's a different argument, though, than sports. The military is a different thing.
I get it. But personally, I think, if you actively want to do that and that's your life role and you don't want to be the secretary of, for, the commander, and you actually want to be in the front line and fighting for the country, by all means. Who is anyone to tell you what you're not allowed to do or what you want to do or what your passion is or what, if that's something that you came from a military family and you want to fulfill that type of, thing, but have at it.
Have at it, yeah.
I think, can women fight as strong as men? How would you know?
We don't know until we try.
We try.
Yeah, I do think, I think it would be, I don't think we know enough. I just don't know enough about what their reasons are for it, why. And the way it's illustrated is that, and they've always been this way, is because, it's not a question of unfairness, but a question of what they need for protection to protect the country the best as far as size. That's their argument. And if it's literally a thing to keep people protected, the being able to pick and choose who they need in it, it makes that argument stronger.
Well, I think that a lot of it has to do with societal issues like who takes care of children. That was the old school, like women go to war, both parents are in the military, who's taking care of children, who, if women die, procreation can't, you know what I mean? And if you cut off the female side that much, then you've got a population issue. I think there's like broader issues that they usually bring up around it than just like a protection side, because they feel the importance of women in society, and should they,
And that should not be
no, it's ridiculous.
That should not be a factor.
No, of course not.
Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying. It's nothing that's in the past framework. It's more about if they have a real reason.
Right.
Because in our society, that happens in certain realms, but if there's a good reason, both sides can agree that that's a good reason.
Correct.
And sports and the military are different in some ways, but I also think there's a lot of, like you just said, bad reasons too, due to past time frames. So I think that's an interesting one. That I'm very for females participating in everything.
Oh, I thought you were sexist.
I know, right? I mean, gosh. Well, according to some people who were, misinterpreted the article. But, I mean, God.
I think the moral of the story is even though we don't have a policing system that will go after you if you say negative comments to someone, we have to almost police ourselves. So if you yourself are spewing out bullshit on the internet, stay away from me because I will call you out. No, I'm just saying. But, I mean, we all have to hold each other accountable, and if you see something that you don't agree with and the person's being, spreading all kinds of bullshit, call them out on it.
Call them out.
But if you're the person doing it, understand the ramifications of what that has as you're talking to another human being, and take a step back and maybe think about what you're about to say to that other human being versus then just having some massive knee-jerk reaction to it. Rise above your emotional sense, and think a little bit more with patience and respect that person also has emotions and triggers and feelings, and see yourself in their shoes, but that's, and take accountability for what you say.
And I think by doing that more, we're going to get everyone, more and more people are going to get on the same page, and hopefully eventually we can have a happier, better society.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be so polarizing. I just feel like every issue is just like so polarizing, where you're either on this side or you're on this side. It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. You can actually find a middle ground.
Right.
You know what I mean? There is no like black and white type thing. It doesn't need to be that way.
People are naturally divisive.
They're extremely divisive, and I think they were just very divisive in this country specifically.
Yeah.
Because that's the natural way to go, and we don't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
We're bored, we just become more decisive, I feel like.
And hopefully over time, we can get people to...
And you know what? Everyone's an adult. You're in charge of yourself. You know what I mean? Take action. And for me personally, if I were to send a message to men, is own what you're feeling. That is way more attractive and way more masculine than you holding it in and acting like the macho man that doesn't have feelings. That to me is not...
It's more masculine to say how 100%. You feel. Yeah, to be...
I think I think personally you are a weaker individual emotionally if you can't voice your feelings. And I can only say that because I was like that. And I was not strong enough to ever really say what I was feeling. So...
And at the same time, the women on the other side, when guys do that, should be respectful to what, like, they should respect the guys.
If you hear a guy say, I feel,
yeah.
You better, like, stop everything you're doing and open your ears, because that rarely happens, and when it does, you're talking to an amazing man right there. Amazing man, and allow him to talk about his feelings and acknowledge them. And I thank men when they do that, when they talk to me, whether it is... I'm like, thank you for opening up, and thank you for expressing how you feel right now. Because it's a big fucking deal. And I know this because it's hard for me to open up. So like, appreciate what that other person's doing and what they're doing. They're stepping out of themselves to share with you who they are.
So both sides.
Both sides,
They're
man.
doing
It's,
that
yeah,
to
for sure.
Get to a better place.
Women need to calm the F down. No, I'm just kidding.
This was great.
This was so fun.
A good chat. We're approaching an hour, so wow.
We were like, oh, maybe we'll just do 25 minutes today. But this topic is so big, and there's just so many, I mean, there's so many legs to it.
So many.
You know,
on and on. Time flies when you're having fun.
It does fly. Next week.
Next week, we need to get a guest back on here. We're working on getting some more guests. It's been a few episodes now. We were at the restaurant last week, which was fun.
Yeah. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Last episode, I guess.
Last episode, yeah.
But we're going to have some more guests on here. We're going to continue to talk about all sorts of things that are going in the world, from AI to futuristic to gender relations to just helping people be better people and understand who they are and
take the blinders off.
And take the blinders off, and that's what we're after here. And we will continue to that. We're 12 episodes in. We'll continue to bring you lots of Geoff and Kira riff week by week. So thank you, everyone. Episode 12.
Thank you.
I'm
so
Geoff.
Fun. I'm Kira.
We will see you next week.
Bye, guys.